Hey everybody, how's it going? And welcome back to Copper Jacket TV. So it's not very often that I get to report on exciting news, but this is very exciting news. There was a lot of really happy people in the state of California yesterday after a judge in that state found that most parts of the California handgun roster are, in fact, like we all knew, unconstitutional. He also placed an injunction on those parts of the roster. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about it. But we're not going to get into the legal mumbo jumbo and the little fine details that nobody really needs to know. We're just going to get into the meat and potatoes of this thing. We're going to talk about it like if we were at the shop. So we're going to talk about what happened, what's going on now, and what we could see here in the future. So we're just going to go ahead and dive right into it. So stay tuned. So let's face it, the California roster is one of the worst pieces of gun control in the entire state. It completely infringes on people's Second Amendment rights. Now, because of the requirements that it takes to get on the roster, nothing new has been added in a long time. I mean, we're talking about things that are 10 or 15 years old. Most of these models have been discontinued in the rest of the country. You go to any other state, they're not even available anymore. But these manufacturers keep them available for those people in California because, again, that's all they can get. The requirements are impossible to meet to get onto that roster. There is nobody in the world that I know of that actually meets all of the criteria that are necessary in order to get something on it. So this judge, just looking at the plain text of the Second Amendment, basically said that's unconstitutional. These requirements being loaded chamber indicators, magazine disconnect mechanisms, micro stamping, all three of which need to be part of the requirements to get on that roster, make it impossible for anybody to get anything new, anything modern, anything that could be considered more safe, which is why most of law enforcement in the state of California carries something that's newer and possibly even safer. So the judge looked at that and said, this restricts what people are able to get. That just clearly violates people's Second Amendment rights. So in doing so, he placed an injunction on that, on the micro stamping, on the magazine disconnect, and on the loaded chamber indicator. So he placed an injunction on the enforcement of those specific requirements, not necessarily the roster itself, but the requirements to get on the roster. That leaves the door wide open for just about anybody else to be able to get on that roster. So that's the basics of what happened here. We'll go into a little bit more detail later on in the video, but just to get a basic understanding of what happened, that's what happened. So what's going on now? Well, the judge placed a 14-day stay on his own order. Well, why would he do that? If he stayed the injunction that he decided, he says it's unconstitutional, right? He places an injunction on it. Why would he then put a stay on his own order, basically allowing something to remain unconstitutional? Well, it's because he expects that California is going to appeal this to the Ninth Circuit, and more than likely they will. A lot of times California has these things ready in advance. They know when they're going to lose, they want to appeal, they know that in the end they're probably still going to lose, but California is great at trying to push things out for as long as possible. I mean, California's stall tactics will go as far as they need to go, just like they've done with Miller and other cases where they've gone all the way back from, let's say, the Supreme Court to the Ninth Circuit and then kicked it all the way back down to Judge Benitez. They're great with these ways to make things last as long as possible. So that's kind of what I'm expecting here. That's what the judge expected. So he put that 14-day stay on there so that I guess California would have enough time to file their appeal before there would be too many changes. But to my knowledge, California has not appealed it quite yet. In other cases, I've seen California appeal it within 12 hours or so. So it happens usually pretty fast. And if they are going to appeal it, I'm assuming we're probably going to see that this week. If they don't, I believe they have until like April 3rd is what the math works out to. So they have a little bit of time, and we need to watch that, because if they don't appeal, then the injunction stands. Now, if they do appeal, and let's say that they appeal to the Ninth Circuit, right? They want a stay on this injunction, a permanent stay on this injunction. It's still possible that the court, just based on Bruen, again, this is all happening post-Bruen, it's possible that the court could say no. This injunction, so here's the thing, this was a 22-page order. That's really what took me so long to make this video. When I got home last night, I was out with the family. It took me a while to really go through all 22 pages, read it, and read it again, and understand exactly what the judge was trying to say. But it wasn't just a short order saying, hey, this is unconstitutional, we stop it. No, it was a 22-page order. And so the courts, the higher court's going to have to look at that, and they're going to have to consider that post-Bruin. And so there is a chance, whether it's 50-50 or not, 60-40, I don't know. But there is a chance that the higher court could decide to uphold the injunction and not California's appeal. So if California appeals the injunction and they get their stay, then it goes to the higher court. And the higher court's going to have to look at everything that the lower court looked at, and there might be even more information once it gets to the higher court. There might be new historians brought in, new information. California always looks for the weirdest type of historical reference to try and justify their law or their rule. And it's going to go through that court system now. It's going to take a long time. These things always take a long time. And with California being really good at stalling things out, that is a very likely possibility. So again, there's two things that could happen here. One, they don't get the stay. And if the injunction is put in place, get ready, because there is going to be a flood of manufacturers that are going to want to get their stuff into the state of California, because believe it or not, when it comes to 4473s, background checks and stuff like that, I mean, California leads the way most of the time. I mean, even versus other states that you would think would always be number one, California has a huge number of background checks per year. So it's definitely a big market, and it's a state that a lot of these people are going to want to be in. So I guarantee you, if the injunction actually holds up, you're going to just see this massive flood onto that roster, and people are basically going to be able to get what they want. Unfortunately, if California does appeal and a stay is granted, it's going to have to go through the higher court system, and they're going to have to it's like a redo, just at a higher level. So does this mean you can go out and get whatever you want now? No, there's a couple things that have to happen before that beautiful day. So in order for that to happen, one, the injunction has to stay. The injunction has to be in effect so that California is barred from enforcing those requirements. Two, the other thing that has to happen is that manufacturers still have to get it on the roster, because the roster still exists. It needs to be completely wiped away, but it still exists, and they're going to have to apply under the new rules and regulations, which aren't really much, right? So, I mean, just about anybody's going to be able to get on that roster right now. But those two things would still need to happen. We need the injunction to stand, and we need manufacturers and companies to get on the roster as well. So I want to reiterate something to you real quick, and this is the most important thing to consider when you think about why the judge found this unconstitutional. It's because nothing on this planet exists that meets the requirement of the roster. Nothing. It would be the same as saying, I want you to go up to Saturn, grab a piece of dust from the rings, and place that in the grip. If you do that, then it can be on the roster. Well, that's impossible. It doesn't exist. The technology doesn't exist to get there, and the technology doesn't exist to combine all of the components that California and the DOJ want you to combine in order to make it on this roster. It is currently impossible. And so being that it's impossible, it's clearly a violation of the Second Amendment. So that's basically a gist of what's going on here, what you can expect now and what you can expect in the future. Okay, I do have a paragraph that I would like you guys to kind of check out. It's the very last paragraph on page 22 from the judge's order. And I think that it's probably the most eye-opening, kind of shows you what the judge was thinking. I'll put it up on the screen if anybody's still here and anybody wants to read along with me, but it says, Californians have the constitutional right to acquire and use state-of-the-art handguns to protect themselves. They should not be forced to settle for decades-old models of handguns to ensure they remain safe inside or outside the home. But unfortunately, the UHA, the CLI, the MDM, and micro-stamping requirements do exactly that. Because enforcing these requirements implicates the plain text of the Second Amendment, and the government fails to point to any well-established historical analogs that are consistent with them, those requirements are unconstitutional, and the enforcement must be preliminarily enjoined. Accordingly, plaintiff's motion for a preliminary injunction is granted. This is dated March 20th, 2023, and I mean, those are beautiful words. Those are beautiful words, because that's what we've all been saying. All of us have been saying that, but for some reason, California likes to think otherwise. They like to think that what they're doing is perfectly constitutional and safe, as long as you balance, the state's interests against your rights. I'm sorry, but when it comes to my rights, the state has no interest in it. You need to leave our rights alone. So I wanted to share that with you. Just have a quick kind of, back and forth. If you guys have any questions or comments, please leave those down there and let me know. I do scan through and read as many of the comments as I can. I got them coming in from every video, but I try and stay on top at least day 1 or day 2 of the comments that are flowing down there. So if you guys wouldn't mind, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Hit that little like button and that little bell notification, and you guys have a great day.